End of the conversation. We'll do another vote at the end. So, why did you decide to run for president? You know, you're in the private sector, you have a career, successful career. Why did you decide? And not only just why did you decide to run for president, but especially because, as someone pointed out, you don't have a lot of experience in government. Why did you choose governor? Why did you start with senator? Why president?
Some people actually advised me as part of their career guidance and counselorship that maybe I should have gone for local government chairman or ward councillor. So I think you're really being so kind to me. But let me put it this way. A few years ago, it became very clear to me that no matter how successful I had become as a consultant, that as long as my nation was not essentially a successful nation, that my success was going to be despised. This was something that was, let me say, was made exceptionally clear to me. Like a couple of years ago, I was traveling to the United States to speak at a conference, flying upper class, you know, doing well, big boy, as we like to say in Nigeria sometimes. And doing a connecting flight through Gatwick, we were going to have privileged boarding, all right? So as we were about to board, I noticed that this really beautiful couple, you know, it's a gentleman was, you know, had all white hair like that beautiful lady that is sitting there, just beautiful white hair. And his wife also just looked apart. She was, and you could see these guys were clean money. They were, you know, you could tell. And so I was there, sitting there, thinking, I was standing there in the queue and thinking to myself, this is what I want to be when I grow up. Cut the long story short. I noticed that as they approached the boarding gate, and the lady at the boarding gate was just supposed to check at the counter, was just supposed to check their ID, boarding pass, and say thank you very much and pass on. She had asked them to stand aside. I couldn't tell what the problem could be. A few other people passed on, and then I got there and extended my passport to her, and she didn't even bother to open it. She asked me to stand and then put the other passport, my passport, which is a Nigerian passport, on top of the two other passports that she had. And now I knew what I had in common with those guys. And so she passed the other few people that were going to fly upper class or so, and then she took out what seemed like a magnifying glass, opened the first passport, did something to it. I didn't know at that time what she was doing. Handed it over with a thank you and a smile. The lady took it, nice, decent lady, said thank you, waited for her husband, collected his passport, and they boarded. And then she opened my passport, and then I realized what she really was doing, which was looking at my American visa with this thing that looked like a magnifying glass. And I was perturbed. Look, this is a visa that I had traveled on maybe 2-3 times in 2 years or so. I mean, I was wondering what this lady was doing with a magnifying glass that the entire United States Immigration and Customs would not be able to do with all their computers. Having scanned through the visa, she gave the passport back to me, and at that time I still needed a little bit of help on who I was. So I folded my hand rather than collect. And she said to me, your passport, sir. And I said, what were you doing? She said, oh, I was just doing my job. I said, what's your job? She said, well, I was told to check the validity of the American visa for every Nigerian. So now that she said every Nigerian, I thought, how is this? Cut the long story short, she said to me, sir, you don't know what it is that we see, but it's really not about you, sir. It's just the reputation of your country. Humbly, I collected my passport. I got on the plane and I wrote down in a note something that I later tweeted, and it went quite viral. And I said, ordinary citizens of great nations will forever be treated better than the successful citizens of failed countries. I also then said, individual success in the midst of collective failure will always be despised. That journey cemented my determination to go beyond my personal success and to ensure that my nation became successful. Now, of course, that journey then led me to the point of asking, why can a blessed country like Nigeria, probably one of the most blessed in the world when you really accumulate its natural resources, its mineral resources, and its human resources, especially, I mean, per square mile. There are very few nations that would probably be able to contend with that most blessed nation status. And yet, why is it that we have not yet become one of the best countries in the world to live? And we looked at all the other great nations, and the only thing that they seem to have more than that we didn't seem to have was good governance. And good governance is simply having good people in governance. People who have the right heart, people who have the capacity, who have the competence, people who have the compassion for the people, they care. So we're talking about caring leaders, visionary leaders, competent leaders, leaders that are willing to hold themselves accountable to the people. And it occurred to me that I had found my new life's mission, to ensure that I was able to do whatever it took to get a critical mass of good people into governance. This meant that we would have to, in a sense, get good people to run for office, good people to vote for those who run for office without asking them for money, and good people to be able to volunteer, set up political platforms that will give them free and fair platforms to run, and more importantly, even good people to go into the regulation and the electoral monitoring. And for me, that has been what this journey has been about, building a capacity for good people. I realized that there's no way you can be able to do this from the outside. You can only draw people in. So when you step up, everyone steps in. And that is what I chose to do on the 22nd of February 2018. I stepped up so that everybody else could step in.
Thank you. So I'm going to bring Mr. Daniel into the conversation now. So I suppose I have the same question for you. Again, been successful in the private sector. Why did you decide to come together to found this political party and then emerge as the chairman?
I think I'll probably answer this question the way Buhari answered this question when I asked him the question in 2015. I remember asking him, why are you running again for the fourth time? And he looked at me and said to me, well, I would have to answer that question with the same way you asked the question. What has changed in Nigeria since I started running? Okay, so what has changed? Nothing has changed. So this is the thing. So many things precipitated this action. I remember an encounter I had, I think, in 2008. I was talking to a man who, in Nigeria, born, raised in Nigeria, 52 years old. And he'd been sick for 3 weeks. I hadn't seen him for a while, so I tried to reach him. And I said to him, where have you been? What's wrong with you? He says, I've not been feeling so well for the last 3 weeks. And I said to him, have you gone to the hospital? And he says, no. I says, why haven't you gone to the hospital? You've been sick for 3 weeks. And he said, well, so I was saying, look, the general hospital, the public hospital, it only costs 1,000 naira for you to register to get treatment. And he looked at me with a smile on his face. And he said to me, sir, yes, I know. But for all my life, I have never held 1,000 naira savings in my pocket. All my life. 1,000 naira. And ever since that day, I've been thinking, how can anyone live in this nation and not save 50-something years and not be able to save 1,000 naira as savings? So, the quest, like everybody else, to want to get involved, to want to change things, I had that quest as well. Many people have that quest. But the issue is, how do we go about changing this narrative? How do we go about doing this? People started stepping up. And that's what Mr. President, like I call him, has done. He's stepped up. To get involved, because it's important to get involved. But I looked at it very differently. That for everyone who steps out, what are the platforms that exist? The platforms that exist in Nigeria as we speak, the political parties that exist are credible platforms. So if you have a credible individual who comes on a platform that is not credible, what would happen to that individual is he would not be able to achieve what he wants to achieve because the system is not credible. So the solution for me was to make sure that we built a credible platform. And credible platform will attract the kind of people we want to see in governance, we want to see in politics. And that's the reason why I am where I am, to create a platform that has the ideology that will give us a Nigeria that you and I would want to live in. A Nigeria that you would not want to live in the UK, but you want to live in Nigeria alone. That's the reason why I'm involved.
Okay. Just staying with you, Mr. Daniel. So, are you a godfather or a party chair? Because in Nigerian politics,
Sorry, let me be sure so that I can know whether to pray to you.
the godfathers, they may kind of make, whoever the candidate they want, that's the candidate and no one else. Is your party transparent? How candidates are selected? Yes, which one are you?
Well, anyone who's followed the party in the last 1 year will see how things have played out. I mean, Fela and I have sort of known of each other for years. We've never met, never talked, but we've always had friends who would either refer to, do you know Fela Durotoye? I say, yes, you should meet him. And then, they say the same thing. Have you met him? And Daniel? He says, no. He says, but you should meet him. And that's gone back and forth. And then, of course, we got involved and found ourselves in a party. Even at that point, I still didn't know him that much. But he was an aspirant, and we had 5 other aspirants in our party. Now, one of the aspirants in particular was a very close friend of mine, in fact, much closer than he was to me. But this was the thing, when it was time for primaries, I think the relationship I had with this individual was a relationship he felt that he could use me to influence the outcome of the primaries. And I said, no. I don't know Fela Durotoye. The reason why I'm involved in this is to create a platform that has integrity. Now, every party has failed this test. The first primary of a party is where you check if that party has integrity. If you fail this test today, you would never be able to have a party that would build that platform. And so that was exactly what turned out. And he became the flag bearer of that particular, of the political party. So yes, it is built on transparency and openness. There's no godfather. We have no godfather. The only people that are the godfathers of our party are the Nigerian people.
I just would like to throw something in, and just so that you know, it probably might also interest some people, and it may not be a big deal to others, that throughout the process of the primaries, I never had to give a single naira to any of the delegates to vote. So this is also very uncommon in politics, because most times the aspirants influence the delegates to ensure that they do vote for them. But in Alliance for New Nigeria, not one kobo had to exchange between aspirants and delegates to get them to be able to deliver the votes that they did. And that, for me, I think is a big deal. And it's something that we're very proud of.
Okay. So, coming back to you, Mr. Durotoye. So, you've been described as having great rhetoric. So I watched you in the presidential debates. I actually wrote this down. And you said, we will build a Nigeria where the son of a nobody can become a somebody without having to know anybody. I was like, chills. However, you've also been criticized for being weaker on concrete policies. So I'm just going to give you the chance to respond to that. And just, again, as you said, we all know the problems in Nigeria, but I'm going to throw some stats at you. And I want to say, if you're elected president, what will you do about this? So, for example, in education, Nigeria has 10.5 million school children out of school between the ages of 5 to 14. Of those who attend, only 61% attend regularly. So these statistics are from UNICEF.
Okay, so those statistics have actually been reviewed since then.
Mm-hmm.
So the newest statistics are showing that we do have 13.2 million children out of school, and that is what, a third of the United Kingdom population, but almost maybe a fourth of the United Kingdom population, something like that, right? But the point that I'm making is this: that we have the largest number of children out of school, and of the ones that are in school, even going to the higher tertiary level, now they're spending more days out of school for things like lecturers strike, at the tertiary level. So we do have something called ASU, which is the Academic Staff Union, Universities Union, and it's very interesting that today, I think, marks 81 days since ASU has been on strike. just to also say that since 2011, ASU has been on strike cumulatively for about 3 years. So we're talking about a school system today that has failed Nigerians. Question is, and I think Bill Clinton was the one who put it in an apt way. He said, in the 21st century, the wealth of nations will not be calibrated by what lies under the feet of its people, but by what lies between their ears. Talking about human capital being the combination of human resource and intellectual capital. And unfortunately, we are building a bankrupt future right now. So what do we do about it? Well, there are three most important things that we need to do to build Nigeria into a world center for academic excellence. And there are three major focus areas. Number one, we must invest in teacher training, in infrastructure, and most importantly, to develop our curriculum so that it is user-friendly. And when I say user-friendly, meaning that when graduates do come out of school, they are able to find or have the requisite skill, knowledge, and attitude, value system, to be able to succeed in the marketplace and in their fields of profession. So the most important things that we have to do include, number one, making sure that we revamp the quality of our teachers. They say, fix a child and you fixed one destiny, but you fix a teacher, you fix a generation. All right? We need to make sure that our teachers are subject experts in their fields of expertise or their fields of training, and so that investment has to be made. We also need to be able to build something in the region of about 10,300 schools right now to be able to accommodate not only the students that are out of school, but also to be able to improve just on the learning environment that the students today do, and so that they can enjoy training. And then the last thing is, like I said, we need to revamp our curriculum so that our curriculum is also able to focus on head, heart, and hands. And when I say head, that's pure education. How do we make sure that those who graduate have the relevant knowledge that is required for the marketplace? Practical example, today, if you were going to be, as a bank, if you go and look at most of the banks in Nigeria, when they're hiring, even after they have, hired from the labor market and they've done aptitude tests to be able to select a few, you realize that they still pass those people who they've now selected through a 10-week induction program. That's just learning on banking and all the different levels. Some of these guys are graduates of banking and finance. What do you want to teach them in 10 weeks that we shouldn't have taught them in 4 years? So the challenge is, over 4 years, they were taught something different from what the banks need. And what we're saying is, why don't we get the private sector, who are going to be the eventual users of the skills, to begin to define what is the relevant knowledge, skill, and the kind of personality that you need to be to succeed in the corporate world. And let them be the ones that help to frame the curriculum. The last thing I want to say very quickly is that we also believe that today there's a major challenge with the way schools are built. Easily, 90% of the administrative costs of running a university, especially in Nigeria, goes to things that have nothing to do with student learning. And I grew up on a campus, on the University of Ife campus, as well as went through my bachelor's degree and master's degree from that same one great institution, Great Ife. But Great Ife is one of the most beautiful campuses in Africa. The only thing is, from the entrance, the gate of Great Ife, to the first building that you see, which is actually our sports center, is about 2 kilometers of dual carriage roads with flowers and street lights. And the question is, what has that got to do with anyone who's in there to learn about law? And, so my point is this: why can't we have specialized universities and have a university of law that could be the size of a faculty of law, that makes it easy for you to run it? So you miniaturize the universities. It's easier to learn. It's subject matter, expertise, and more importantly, it's cheaper for you to be able to admit the students because it's just cheaper to run the university. So we are going to be seeing the emergence of specialized universities, universities of health sciences, universities of law, universities of mechanical engineering. This is one of the most important things that we're going to do. But our focus is going to be on especially primary education, to be sure that every child in Nigeria must be able to read and write before the age of 6.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to need briefer answers from you. This is what happens when you give a professional speaker the microphone. Okay, so next, power. So Nigeria currently generates, according to USAID, 4,000 megawatts of power. The conservative estimate of what we need to be generating is about 42,000 megawatts of power. So,
all right, so our goal is to make sure that over the next 4 years, we're able to scale up our power generation to 23,000 megawatts. All right? Now, I will describe the situation with power like I described the situation in Nigeria. It's like holding a stone in a catapult and pulling it back. It really only needs to be released. The level of investment that is required to upscale our power generation and capacity exists, but there are a few constraints that are beleaguering the sector. So there are generation constraints, transmission constraints, and I would say distribution constraints. With generation, the following are really the greatest challenges that we have. Number one is that we actually, let me start by saying 80% of our generation capacity comes from gas. Unfortunately, even though Nigeria is a gas nation with some crude oil, we're still flaring gas, and with the gas that we're currently producing, we would rather sell it in the international market for about $4.20 per cubic meter, rather than sell at a particular pegged rate of $2.40, which is where the thing. So it doesn't. The people who should be investing in helping us to capture the gas, pipe it, and make it user-friendly for thermal stations or gas stations, just don't find it attractive to do so. So we have a pricing problem there. We've got to solve that pricing problem. Would it make power more expensive? Yes, it will. But there are ways that we're able to find to subsidize power for those who need that subsidy. Somebody who definitely has 6 or 7 air conditioners in their home, they're not the kind of people that a little price increase may not worry. But that's the first thing. We need to also ensure that we look into alternative sources of power. I mean, today we're seeing solar, wind, and Nigeria is so blessed with solar and the sun and the heat of the sun that that's going to be something that we can do very well. But the challenge is not just with generation; it's also with transmission. Transmission has become like a bottleneck, right? With the fact that we have to improve our transmission grid by investing in it, making sure that it's well maintained, and then to optimize its capacity to carry power to the distribution centers. But no matter how much we invest in transmission, we're still going to have a major problem that the rest of the world has solved, which is, why are you having to generate power only to pass it through a straw to be able to get it to where you're going? So why don't you just release and let the legislature, in a sense, deregulate the transmission sector so that it is possible to actually generate power and transmit directly to the consumers in a way that cuts down transmission costs and therefore the cost of power. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to deregulate that. But then there are also distribution challenges. There are technical losses that are being incurred by the distribution companies because there's just so much of a lack of investment that went in over time. And so they've inherited really bad transformers, bad cable lines, and all of those kind of things. And we believe very strongly that most of them have bitten more than they can chew. Some of these distribution companies are trying to manage 6 states, distribution in 6 states. They haven't seen anything or done anything like this before. We believe that we should miniaturize the size of those coverage areas for distribution so that there will be more distribution companies, but they will cover smaller areas, and therefore they will need less money to be able to get that done. And everybody will be able to put in the right level of investment. But to do that, they also then need to have, to solve their commercial losses and their collection losses. So there are many Nigerians today that are taking power but not paying for it. And we must make sure that we ensure that we invest in making sure that every Nigerian can have prepaid meters. But then most importantly, we must convince Nigerians of what and why it's important that they pay for power. That power is a right, yes, as it is in any great nation, but you must use it responsibly and you must also pay for it. And I think that that's the most important thing. So it's a lot of all the different policies that need to work together, but power, let me close with this. Power has been solved as a problem in almost every other nation in the world. In fact, I do not know any other nation that has the kind of power problems that Nigeria is facing. Not with 170 billion naira that has gone towards trying to solve that problem over the last 20 years. In a sense, we've talked about the fact that we've really spent money buying darkness rather than buying light. All right? And unfortunately, you cannot empower if you do not have power. So we need to get the power sector solved. The problem is not really about whether we can get it solved for two reasons. Number one, please, I know that this is taking a long, but power is very important to everyone. Number one, please remember two things that happened in Nigeria in the last, let me say, 6 years. First of all, there was a minister of power by the name of Professor Enaji, okay, Bartholomew Enaji, who worked very hard with the right team, and all of a sudden, sometime around, maybe I think it was 2015, 2014 or so, Nigeria did have stable power. In fact, there was a point in time that my generator batteries literally ran down. And all of a sudden, a newspaper called Business Day did an article that talked about how there had been a drop in the price of, or in demand for kerosene, in demand for petrol, and in demand for diesel. The next day, Bartholomew was fired. That is not the big story. The big story is that the night Bartholomew was fired, after about almost 6 months of having constant power, my power went out. So how is it that all of a sudden you fire the guy who's doing a great job and I don't have light? I realized what happened was that the guy who used to be scared to turn off my light actually now realized that the problem had been solved. Bartholomew had been fired and now they turned it off. So for me, I think that Nigeria has solved the problem. The second proof positive of that is that when the current president came in, for the first 4 to 5 weeks, most people will agree with me that there was power in Nigeria. And when people were talking about why do we seem to have constant power all across Nigeria, they said, that the power sector was monitoring his body language. So that tells me that, guys, the darkness is actually manufactured. That the darkness we have in Nigeria is not just because of all these technical losses and commercial losses and grid lines. There is more to it. And the one thing that I know that there is to it is that when the people who import diesel and generators are the biggest funders of the parties that get elected, then there is probably no way that you're going to have power. We do not have any godfathers. We do not have any cabals. Alliance for New Nigeria does not have any ties with anybody that imports diesel or generator. We will solve the power problem, I can promise you that.
I'm sure more issues will be raised in the Q&A. I'm going to bring Mr. Daniel into the conversation again. Young people, I count myself as one, by the way, we are often used as cannon fodder in the political process. So we're the ones who go on rallies, we're the ones who put up the posters, we're the ones who march, who add numbers to a campaign. But often, there's very little position for young people within party structure. So they're the foot soldiers, but they're not actually very involved in the decision making. What's different about ANN?
Thank you for asking that question. First, I think I should just clarify that the young people that you claim are involved in posters are not your kind of young people. They're thugs.
I do not know the thug.
Yeah, back in Nigeria, the area boys, whatever it is. When you say it's a youth movement of a party, or PDP or APC, when you go there, you just see thugs gathered together. That's you don't have young people. Yes. Okay. But ANN, the entire structure is driven by young national chairman, it's driven by the presidential candidate is young, all aspirants on the platform are all young. We made sure that the nomination forms were affordable across the board. So we have a lot of young people from the House of Assembly, House of Assembly, House of Rep, Senate, and even governor. We have one of the youngest governors running, and in fact, one of the strongest candidates in one of the Middle Belt states at the moment. So it's a party for young people, and the idea is to ensure that people can actually be involved in politics and not think that they need a godfather that would require them to do one or two things. It's just if you have what it takes to run for office, that's the platform for you to come from, and that's what ENN is about. It's just an open platform for anyone who feels that they have something to give to Nigeria.
Can I quickly just add that the youngest candidate in Nigeria's history is actually a candidate on the platform of the Alliance for New Nigeria. His name is Michael Agbabiaka. You can Google him. And he's running for what we call the State House of Assembly in Ogun State. And so I would like you to please at least acknowledge us. We've made history also. We have the youngest candidate in Nigeria's history on our platform. He's 25 years old.
So you've come here 2 weeks before the elections. The elections are in 2 weeks. And I want to know, what message do you have for the Nigerians in diaspora? Why is it so important for you to be here?
Okay, I did come here basically to remind Nigerians in diaspora something that I've shared over the last 2 years. But this is crunch time, okay? So I came to remind Nigerians in diaspora how influential they are, especially with Nigerians at home. In 2017, Nigerians in diaspora sent home $22 billion. That is according to the World Bank reports, and that's really the formal, just through the formal channels. When you add up the, please can you help me give my brother 50 pounds, and please I'll just send you an envelope for you to give to my mom. And when you add up that, it easily would come to at least double that. And so when Nigeria government actually talks about diaspora remittances, they actually use things like saying $45 billion, okay? And when you look at that's significant. That's more than 10% of our GDP, which is $375 billion. And so Nigerians in diaspora are perhaps, in a sense, the most important funding group demographic that powers that at least covers the failure of our social security in terms of the government in providing that social security. You are the ones that send money to your cousins. You are the ones that send money to your, to when someone needs to go to hospital and when they need to, you are the one that funds these people. Now, let me also say at this point in time that the people who typically vote are also funded, but this time by politicians. And when politicians give them money, they give them with an instruction and tell them exactly how to vote. But you give money out of a good heart, out of love, and you send money home to these guys. But unfortunately, you don't tell them what to do. And last year, I believe, or even from upper year, I started to talk to Nigerians in diaspora to get them to understand the power and the influence that they have and how to use that to direct for a better cause of Nigeria, that influence. So I said things like, before you send the next £100 home, ask your cousin that you're sending it home to show you his PVC. And people laughed at it, but guess what? People started doing it. And they started calling home and saying, I have $100 to send to you, but I want to see your voter's card. Today, the result of that is that for the first time, we now have 23 million new voters in one electoral cycle. And I believe that that's in part, because of the pressure that those in diaspora had put on those at home to say, go get your voter's card. Now the point is, you may need to advise them to vote for the Alliance for Nigeria. Because most of the time, they just need someone who gives direction. And there is nothing wrong with giving that direction. Remember that when we fix Nigeria, I didn't say if we fix Nigeria, when we fix Nigeria and restore the glory days of Nigeria back to the kind of things that you saw in that video, that then the pressure, the demand pressure on you will lessen. So in a sense, it's actually your enlightened self-interest to be sure that we have good governance in Nigeria. And I just came to remind you to please do what you have to do. Pick up your phone. Call everyone that you send money home to. Tell them to get involved. Tell them not to sell their votes, otherwise you will never send money home again. Tell them to make sure that they vote But the most important thing is really just getting you to get involved. And if you can't use your thumb because you don't yet have the legislative rights to do so, at least use your tongue to convince as many people. And I promise you, and this is the party's position on this, within 4 years of an Alliance for New Nigeria-led government, by 2023, diasporans will vote. We will make sure that
Yes.
Let me just quickly add to that. From a party perspective, we strongly believe in the influence that diasporans have. And you don't have to wait till the time that you can vote. We understand the power of that influence. As a political party, I have members who are in diaspora, who whenever they come to Nigeria, they're always dedicating their time in trying to help the party grow. You see, we want you to understand what we're doing. We want you to understand what this party is about. We're not saying that we want to tell you what we're doing. We say, let's build this together. Let's begin to start building something back home. Because whether you like it or not, there will be a time when you will come back home. And the question is, come back home to what? That's why we're doing what we're doing. Not just for us, but for you and I, that our children will have a home, a country that they'll be proud of to go back to. And you are the narrative. You are the ones who are ambassadors of this nation. Listen, there's so many bad news coming out of Nigeria. But I always say this, we're not the worst country in the world. But every other country, the media is always pushing forward what is positive. And you have a responsibility to always ensure that you represent that positivity that Nigeria is about. And we want to hold you accountable to that, to ensure that together we build this new Nigeria that we want to see.
So my last question, before I open it to the Q&A, is a question often asked of female politicians, not often of men. You're both married, you both have wives, you both have children. How do you balance family life and politics?
As a business consultant and leadership expert, I've had to even deal with that before just issues of politics. Just how do you balance this thing they call work-life balance? And I always say, first of all, there is nothing such as work-life balance. Work is part of life, and life also includes work. So it's how do you just balance life? So work is part of it. How do you balance family, work, self-development, and all of the other key issues around? And the thing about it is that you really can never get balance. What you do is just give your best to the time that you have with the people that you have it with. So there will be times when I'm away, as I am now, from my home. And I would have momentary calls with my wife. What I do is to make sure that those calls or those moments are magical moments. That I will say things to my wife that will last her till I come back. So that she will hear something from me in 10 minutes of conversation. And when I've dropped, for the next 3 days, I'm not there. But throughout those 3 days, she's still smiling. Right? So it's really about creating magical moments with every time that you have to give to whatever it is. When I'm on the field, I am dedicated to the people that I'm connecting with. And when I take time to call home, or when I'm at home, I shut down everything else and just stay connected with my kids. Right? So for me, that's really how it is. But the other part of it is just carry them along. There is, before we went on this journey, I told I literally took the permission of my wife and my kids. They knew what was going to be at stake. And they've literally been such, so integrated into this. I'm sure many of the people on the Fela Durotoye campaign and even in Alliance for New Nigeria as a whole will be able to testify that my wife is very involved. And that in itself draws us together. So it's a form of balance, if you want to call it that. Same with my kids. They're constantly checking out things and then giving me advice. So one of my sons especially has become like a political consultant because he reads up so much on things and that makes him bond more. But I guess the most important thing is the moments that we have together, we make them very special so that they will make up for the time that we don't have together.
I hope the married men in the room are listening.
I think these have been proven over years. For me, focus is fun. Fun is very important. Everything you build, everything you achieve, the foundation was you have a very solid family. And so creating a balance for me is not so difficult. It's where you put your priority. In as much as I'm based in Lagos and my office is in Abuja, which means I'm there Mondays to Friday. But I do things that, members of my party are constantly wondering, what in the world is wrong with this man? I'd arrive Abuja in the morning Monday, and I could leave. I have a meeting on Tuesday, but I had a conversation with my daughter or my son, and there's a feeling that they'd like to see me. I would fly that same day in the evening, go back to Lagos, take them to school in the morning, and come back to Abuja. Now that's how I create balance. It's important. It's not how much you spend. It's understanding the value of family. I will give the time that is necessary to be with them, to always ensure that there's nothing that is more important than them at any point in time. And that is something that I do so well, and I will continue to prove it. So I think family is number one before we go on.
Thank you. On that note, we are going to open this discussion for questions. We're ready with our roving mics. I just want to reiterate that a question is something you can put a question mark at the end of, not a full stop. So questions, please, no comments.
Thank you. Thank you very much to both of you for the responses you've given. In my opinion, that could be wrong, I think probably the greatest challenge that Nigeria faces is unity between the different sort of ethnic groups and that. How are you planning to tackle that if you're president?
Okay. Well, let me say that the last few months, I would say at least the last 1 year, I've been on a tour, especially around Nigeria. And I find something that is very interesting, that this whole disunity is more of a concept rather than a reality. I'll explain to you what I mean. In any 1 week, I could be in a village in Jigawa State, and before the end of the week, I'm in another village in Ekiti State, just like last week. Okay, so I was in Omoe, Ekiti, and let me say within a matter of eight days, I was in Omoe, Ekiti. I was in Jigawa, and I was also in a local market in Uyo. And I find out that, you know what, the love that I get in Omo is the same love I get in Jigawa. It's the same love I get in Uyo. In fact, some of you may have seen a video that went viral recently of a young man who saw my picture on a car, and the guy was saying, listen, I'm not an Igbo man, I'm not a Yoruba man, I'm not a Hausa man, I'm in Nigeria. And that is the message that I hear all the time. In a sense, disunity is, for me, the way I see it, not, it's almost like a narrative that the older generation are selling to be able to qualify themselves as the only ones that can solve it. Right? We are united in pain. Right? You go to Plateau State, and most of the villages there have not had power. And you go to Omo, Ekiti, and the king says to you, we haven't had light in 12 years in 2019. They are both, the suffering is the same. But guess what? I also find out that the aspirations are the same. That the aspirations are not much maybe about Nigeria, but just the quality of life and standard of living. That everybody wants to live well. And that I think that the disappointment with Nigeria that has led to much of this, bickering around whether we should break up or whether we should, is really just because Nigeria is not working for people. That most people who complain about issues about unity in Nigeria, when they get out of Nigeria, the same people that think that, oh, you are Yoruba, I'm Igbo, once they come out of the shores of Nigeria, they become Nigerians. The only place where Nigerians are not Nigerians are in Nigeria. I don't know whether you get what I'm trying to say. So my point is this, and just to say, number one, we've got to strengthen the narrative of Nigeria, especially a new Nigeria, because we find out that that's what everyone wants. They want a nation that works for not just a privileged few, but a nation that works for all. They want a nation where no one is disenfranchised because of where you come from, but because of what it is that we're able to do together. So I know that we are united in aspiration, but more importantly, we have to be united in vision. So a strong vision unites a people. But that's not all. A strong set of values also unite a people. And one of the things that we've been able to put together is a set of 10 value statements that we have tested to go beyond religion, beyond tribe. Every tribe endorses it, every religion endorses it. And we've been able to say, when given the opportunity to lead, we will use the National Orientation Agency to drive that common set of values into the psyche of all Nigerians. If you don't mind, I'll just quickly give you 10 sets of those. The statements. Number one, make a positive impact on everyone you meet and everywhere you go. Every Nigerian wants that. Number two, be a solution provider and not a part of the problem to be solved. Number three, be a role model worthy of emulation. Number four, be your best in all you do, particularly the things you're naturally good at. Number five, do the right thing at all times, regardless of who's doing the wrong thing. Number six, value time and make the best use of it. Very soon, Nigerian time will mean exactly on time, as we saw today. Okay? Number seven, care and show respect to all through your words and your actions. Number eight, consciously build a great legacy, starting now, today, and every day. Number nine, live a life of integrity and honor. And number 10, make your family, your nation, and your God proud. And integrating those into the education system, into translating them into different languages, so that in a sense we are all bound by the same set of values, and what is right, and what is wrong is wrong for every Nigerian. But we are also going to make sure that in schools, right, we will make sure that the first 4 languages that any child will learn is English, because that's our national language, right? Then Hausa, Yoruba, Igbo, all together. And so that at any point in time, a 7-year-old or 8-year-old will be able to converse in basic terms in any language that you find in Nigeria. These are the major languages. Languages unite people. And we're going to also go through orientation that teaches us language. Lastly, we're going to make sure that over the next 4 years, we will do everything we can to ensure that we expunge state of origin out of the Constitution and we put state of residence back in the Constitution. Now, for those who live outside Nigeria, they may not even know how important that is, right? But if you think about it, I was born in Ibadan, I was raised in Ife, and then all my professional lives, I've lived in Lagos, 27 years now. And yet, if I want to run for governor of Lagos State, having paid my taxes and developed the place, they're going to say to me, your father is from Ekiti. So go to Ekiti. Meanwhile, my father has never lived in Ekiti. But that his father didn't live much in Ekiti, at least from Ekiti. But this is the point that I'm making. We are disenfranchising people by this, where you are from and all of that. And those are narratives of the past. And they will go with the old politicians. We are coming in as new nations. We will be united.
Hi, my name is Alfonso Zaro. I read your manifesto and you talked about nation building and your vision for New Nigeria by the 2025. I just want to know, speaking for myself and the Nigerian diaspora, aside voting and encouraging our family back home to vote, what else we can do to help you achieve that goal? That's one question. And the second question is democracy truly working for Africa, especially Nigeria, a country that has 190 million population, and there's no infrastructure, no good road, no clean water, poor electricity is very bad, and the question we must ask ourselves is it really working? Because what I've seen, and according to what is the evidence in the ground, is that it's only working for the political class. And so, as a leader who wants to step into a position of power, so I want to ask you, is the democracy actually working for us as a people? Thank you.
Well, let me start with
Sorry, please, can we take the questions in bundles? Can we have one more at least?
Hello. Hello. So my question is pretty straightforward. I just want to ask. Okay, my name is Toby Godson. I just want to ask about how ANN plans to tackle PDP and APC, because as far as we're concerned, they seem to have to be running the country as if it's like a Godfather's kind of system. So what are the practical steps or the practical plans we have in place to tackle that mentality of only these parties run the country? How do we, maybe with the coalition or everything else, but what are the steps that ANN has? What are the strategies you have in place to deal with those pretty much established parties so we can actually get proper leaders who have the future of the country at heart?
Very timed because the question follows on pretty much directly. And if, whatever way, if this February those plans and your campaigns don't get you over the line, will you be there next time? Are you going to continue? Will you be keeping up the fight?
Okay, let's stop there and answer this. Okay, no, we'll come back to you. We'll come back to you and take another bundle because that was 4.
Okay, so we should quickly do this?
Yes, please.
Okay, very quickly. I believe that democracy will work if we had democracy. Unfortunately, we don't have democracy. If democracy means, like one great leader once said, a government of the people, for the people, and by the people, we don't have democracy yet. We have a form of it, but we lack the power or the substance thereof. And the greatest part of that substance that is lacking is internal democracy within the political parties, so that the members of the parties are the ones who have the power to decide who actually represents them as candidates of the party. Unfortunately, right now, we don't have that. We have what you call selectocracy, which means that there is a cabal that literally determines within most of the parties who gets to run. We talked about godfathers and all of that. So unfortunately, democracy is not working because the cabals retain power even when guys get elected. The cabal still are the ones who choose who gets appointed, and it has nothing to do with skill and all of those things. They're looking for people who will be subservient to their own needs. And then more importantly, the cabal also provides the funding to convince the people who really, they don't have any real promise to make to, that they should vote for them. And then, of course, when the cabal then gets there, or the people getting there, the cabal get their money back through corruption and overinflation of contracts and all of that. So what we have is, you want to write this now? Cabalocracy. That's what we have. That's what we have. And unfortunately, cabalocracy does the same exact thing everywhere else as it does in all of Africa or around the world, where you have a strong set of people and they weaken institutions, but that's not all. They make sure that you have poverty, you have ignorance, so that people are hungry and they're not literate, and then they use financial means to induce them, and then they get their money back through corruption. So that comes with the system, and it doesn't provide anything. So what can the diasporans do? The diasporans can help to fund, to educate, to give policy ideas, and we have enjoyed that. A lot of the policy ideas that you see, especially even in our manifesto, much of that research were done by people here. Some of them are here in the US, some of them, here in the UK, others in the US, all across Nigeria, and of course in Nigeria. So there's sharing of ideas. The most important thing about democracy, about people in diaspora, is that they are living the future of Nigeria. So what we consider to be a future potential is is your current reality today. It's what you take for granted. So all of the things that you experience can be ideas that we can implement at home, and we'd like to see how that works. Okay? Thank you.
Practical steps to tackle the APC and PDP. Well, that's the reason why we got involved in this, is to just change the narrative that you have today. What do we have in the political system that you see? It's I call it the African politics, which is keep the people impoverished, steal money, and buy their votes every 4 years. It's a very lazy kind of politics. But what we're bringing to the table is very simple. Now, the exciting part for me is not so much as the election itself, because we know we're going to win, but it's the fact that it's a long-term plan. It is a 20-year, 30-year vision that we have to build this political platform. And the way we want to go approach this is ensuring that from the grassroots all the way back up, that we have individuals who are doing community projects, social impact projects impacting those communities and building that profile all through till the election year. We will, by 2023, we will not have any candidate on the platform in ANM who has not done anything in the constituency, who are not known in the constituency. You have to have done things in your constituency. Your constituency must know you and seeing the impact that you've given before you can be what do you call it, an aspirant or a candidate on our platform. Because this is the way we can kill money politics. When people are seeing how much you're giving to their community, no one will come 4 years after to come and buy their votes. We want to be involved right from the beginning and build all of that all the way back up. It's a lot of hard work, but we're ready to put ourselves into that. And there's just so much energy with those who are part of the movement, both in Nigeria, outside Nigeria, and we're saying we want to keep that momentum going on. So to answer your question, yes, sir. After elections, we're right in there. You know, our sleeves will be rolled up, making sure that we get this going on. We will still come back, and that's the thing. This is one of the town hall meetings we will have, not just because of the elections, but you will see us over a period of 4 years keep coming back to have meetings like this and to share ideas, to get feedback from you, and see how we can build this political party that will give us a new Nigeria. Thank you very much.
Very good. Okay. Yeah, okay.
Good evening, gents. Thanks for coming in this evening. My name is Lawrence Atim, and I've got two quick fire questions. And the first one is about how you're financing this campaign, because I can imagine it's quite expensive flying around and meeting people. The second question is really, actually, before I ask this question, I just want to thank you, because I feel I'm a victim of this state of origin thing as well. So my parents are from Akwa Ibom State, but
So this, you know, and I am sure you, let me start, if you don't mind, with the security question very quickly. Not for any reason, just because there's some interesting answer in my head. You know, I've always said that my name is Fela Durotoye. Those are two names, but it's really one person. I've always believed that APC and PDP are only two names of the same party, right? And the way you know is that they same ideology, same acts. And one of the things that you notice is 1 year to election, both APC and PDP have always voted $1 billion to fight Boko Haram. It's like you can predict, and it's because they're run on the same system. It's the same cabals. It's the same thing. So we are not that. That's who they are. We're different. What will we do about security? Number one is to strengthen our institutions to become the most effective and efficient, the most respectable and respectful agents of security anywhere, especially at least in Africa, and hopefully sometime soon around the world. What will that take? Well, it means that we have to hire the right security agents, and we have to train them, and we have to equip them. And most importantly, we've got to be able to remunerate them in a way that motivates them. And they're willing to put their lives on the line, knowing fully well that if there's ever a fallen soldier, no one is going to pretend to call his wife, right? We will actually take care of them, all right? So that is one of the first things. We must strengthen institutions, but to make sure that they are ready to win, we must also have superior intelligence. So institutions is one thing, intelligence is another. I mean, it's strange that the Boko Haram knows when our military are moving and they can attack them, and yet our people don't know, our military doesn't know when Boko Haram is coming. So it seems like Boko Haram has more intelligence than our people. So our security agents. So intelligence is extremely important. But to make sure that intelligence is effective, we also have to have integration. Integration of intelligence and integration with the communities, so that we are able to share intelligence across all the borders. So the Air Force has drones that are supposed to be flying over and they can tell what movements are, but they have to share that with the army and make sure that the army can tackle it. The last thing I'd like to say, or second to last, with security, is we also have to make sure that we strengthen our international collaborations, right? Every time we put pressure on Boko Haram, for instance, right? Every time we put pressure on Boko Haram, they run across the border. Question is, why isn't there the army on the other side ready to sandwich them and get the job done, right? It's because there's weak international collaboration. But at the heart of all of this is we must remember that, look, there is an ideology of growth, jobs, productivity, and prosperity that always kills the idle hands that get involved in any kind of security threat. Everywhere where people are productive and prosperous, you will notice that security enhances. And so it's to focus on that ideology and build the economy, strengthen opportunities for people, get people jobs, and make sure that they're able to prosper. And when we do that, I promise you, you will see a reduction in that. How do we finance the campaign? We finance it by the hands of ordinary people like you and I, right? It's amazing how students, university students, are given 500 naira, 1,000 naira every month. Some of them every week. You know, the most amazing one happened last week. 2 days ago, when my wife said someone donated 2,000 naira and had sent a screenshot of the bank balance of the transaction, but forgot to strike out the bank balance. Guess what the bank balance was? 11,200 and something naira. Right? So, sorry, 9,200 and something naira. So, this lady, out of 11,000 naira, gave 2,000 naira and had a balance of 9,000. That's the typical average, but it's just a number of people who believe in what we're doing that is causing them to support this. We don't have any anybody that has given, at least to our campaign, more than 1 million naira, which is the limit that INEC has given to us to do. And it's the same thing for the party, okay? Healthcare. Our primary focus as it relates to healthcare is really the primary healthcare centers. And making sure that, because 90% of the diseases that really kill Nigerians are diseases that can be solved if we had just healthcare, especially at the primary healthcare level. And today, unfortunately, because primary healthcare is supposed to be managed and funded by the local governments, who are themselves defunded, unfortunately, that's not been able to happen. So the most important thing is we need to work with the local governments to ensure funding for primary healthcare centers, and we need to ensure that it is accessible, and to make it accessible and affordable, we must make sure we make health insurance a necessity for everyone who can. And one of the ways that we're looking at how do you make it easy for people to be able to pay for healthcare insurance is just looking at their mobile phones. 140 million Nigerians have mobile phones, right? Most of them load up enough to be able to pay for healthcare insurance from just their airtime. We should be able to make it easy for people to do so, and we will make that. So insurance is important, institutions are important, making sure that we build infrastructure is important, and we're dedicating monies to matching funds for that. I think the last thing that we want to do is to talk about making sure that we have trained healthcare practitioners. And we don't have enough doctors, and some of the doctors that we have are today already getting on planes and flying abroad to go and get better jobs. But you don't need medical doctors, 7-year trained, to become healthcare paramedics or practitioners. We can have community healthcare officers that can be trained to diagnose simple things like how do you treat malaria, how do you treat diarrhea. They're kind of things that usually just kill in Nigeria that doesn't kill anybody else anywhere in the world. So it's making sure that we focus on health practitioners, the healthcare infrastructure itself, insurance, and essentially making sure that we deliver quality primary healthcare that is affordable. In terms of urban planning, let me say that our goal is to double our building construction every year. We currently are doing between 150,000 and 180,000. In our estimate.
Yes.
I guess my question would actually go to Mr. Emmanuel, because it was actually inspired by the comment you made when you were asked about how young people were being used as fodder. And I thought it was quite interesting when you said, have you seen some of the young people? I think you referred to them as thugs. I don't know if we're using that word for emphasis or just to sort of create a clear difference in our minds of the category of young people you wanted to talk about. But I really wanted to question you on that, and I also think it's good that the question goes to you, because I noticed that most of the responses you give have to do with what the long-term plans of the party is, that sort of thing. And this question has to do with, how do you see the future of young people? And when I say young people, I don't mean the young people that look like my colleagues in this room. I mean the ones that actually make up the majority of the young people in Nigeria. And I'm asking specifically, if you want to have a sort of pictorial reference, about the young people I saw that had tried to make their way across to Libya. Those people, I saw a lot of frustration, I saw a lot of despair in there. These were people that in some cases had been sort of sold, had been sort of auctioned off to do some back-breaking work, and there was international outrage. But for me as a person, and being fully aware of the privileges that I have, I mean, I've come here because all those questions are being asked. So they are as topical for me as the place of these immigrants. So please, what are the plans you have for young people like that, the ones that are making all these desperate journeys to Libya? How are you going to convince them to stay in Nigeria?
Okay, thank you.
Sorry.
Thank you. Okay, so that's one question. So we have a question over there, please.
Thank you. My name is Dere Ajayi, and I'm desperate to buy into your optimism. All the questions have been valid. The one simple one, hopefully simple, that I have, what are some of the strategies you have to tackle the everyday low-level corruption that we seem to wear so casually? If I think about coming into Lagos or leaving, from the airport alone, I'm parted with some of my money that's supposed to be meant for the cousins of the parents. What are the strategies we take to address? You talk about the values and all of that, where we get to a state in the 4 years where there are systems and processes in place that make such behavior unacceptable, where we put in a framework of professionalism. We're asking, for me, what are you giving me today? That becomes something that is just not tolerated. It's unacceptable to who we are as Nigerians.
Thank you. Okay, there's one question here, one question there, and a lady at the back again. As I said, this is the female round. We need to balance gender parity by 2020. Thank you. Okay, so one question there.
Hi, good evening. My name's Aminat Sule.
Durotoye spoke about education earlier, but there's still large inequities between public and private universities in Nigeria, and industrial action is something we've been plagued by for the last few decades, and it's a continuing cycle that hasn't been tackled efficiently. So how is Alliance for Nigeria going to combat the persistent industrial action and reduce the frequency and hold the federal government accountable?
Okay, passes, yes.
I think I'll just take most of the questions that we're asking, and I want us to just be, that the different issues in Nigeria, talking education, health, youth, all the things that are plaguing Nigerians. The reason why we have that problem is simply one monster, and that's corruption. When you tackle corruption, it would help you do and fix a lot of the things that you have in place. Now, one of the things that we've always talked about is strengthening the law enforcement of Nigeria and the judiciary. These are two critical areas that I believe that if we do strong reforms in those areas, we can get ourselves to ensuring that we get people who would follow and ensure that the laws, they abide by the laws. We must strengthen these areas. And for us, it's a very strong focus on how we reform the police and reform that. Today, it's very easy, just like what she was saying earlier, when you look at the immigration officers, you look at the police officers, and it's easy to point fingers to say, this individuals are corrupt. But the truth is, if you really go to where they live, if you go to the barracks where these people live, they live worse than the states of animals. And the buildings that they live in have no repair work, no renovation have been done in 30 years. I mean, they have walls that are so dark. That was not the previous color when they painted it, probably gray or white, but they're so dark now, out of dirt, over 30 years. Now you expect individuals like this to come out and give you the best of service? Let us be true to ourselves. Minimum wage is nothing for anyone to be able to do anything. If you find a man in Nigeria standing by the roadside and is acting as a police officer, I think you should give him a pat on his back for even coming out at all in the first place. So we do have a lot of work to do. And that work is ensuring that we reform and create jobs. It's really about creating jobs. Once you create jobs, you ensure that the youth are engaged and people are empowered. It's very important that these are things that we must focus on. But to build all of these things and to be able to reform these things, we must start with ensuring that we focus on the law enforcement and the judiciary. If you can take those two units and take it well, this agency as well, everything else spills properly and you can build on those platforms. I'm just taking that as a foundation and allow the presidential candidate to take that off from here. And then pretty much, someone asked about the coalition. Yes, we started it already. We started a coalition already with one of the political parties, and we're talking to other members who are also in the political space that share the same ideology as us, and we want to be able to form a force, not just for the election, but post-election to always have a pressure cook that would always hold the government accountable. That's what we're forming, and that's what we're forming. Thanks.
Just to follow up on the corruption question, you actually did do a really great job talking about also some of the solutions, right? Which include, systems and processes, automating many of those systems and processes to make sure that they do not have, there's not much interface between, people and cash. But corruption is more than just, taken from the till. Sometimes it's also extortion. Just being able to say, I will not do what I'm paid to do until you give me something. And we find out that currently it is very easy to do the wrong thing in Nigeria and very difficult to do the right. What we want to do is to reverse that. Under ANN, an ANN-led government will make it easy to do the right thing and very difficult to do the wrong. Why? Because we'll make it easy for you to do it. You will be motivated to do the right thing. You will know what the right thing is. The values will tell you. The remuneration and all of that we will treat. When you care for your people, they will have the care that they can give to others. And you don't care for them, they don't have enough care to care for anybody else, except for themselves. So we've got to make it easy for people to report when there are extortions that are being made. You want to make sure that you have cameras at key areas where people have been known to ask for things that they should not have. And you put those systems in place, right? And number two, you want to make it easy for people to investigate when reports are made. And you've got to make it easy, like the chairman said, especially for the judiciary, to prosecute those who have been investigated. But one thing that we also want to make sure is that when people are actually found guilty for corruption, they will become what you will call integrity crusaders. We're going to make sure that whilst you're in jail, you will go to primary schools and secondary schools. If you want to be able to get some kind of pardon, early pardon, and tell them, hey guys, you know what? I'm a jailbird right now, but I used to be a former governor, and I stole. And I want you to understand the importance of what I did. And doing that, you are going to strengthen the value of integrity. I think the darkness of corruption can only be busted with the integrity of light, or the light of integrity. Put light into the heart of people, put integrity into the heart of people, and corruption will flee. Anti-corruption, anti-terrorism, anti-anything always leads to more of that thing. What we should have is pro-integrity, not just anti-corruption. All right? Vice presidency. Well, I've always said to people, you should pursue the things that you have a vision for and you have a passion for. Most people who know me know that I've had a vision and a passion for Nigeria. And that's really, and you ask yourself, which of all the layers of possibilities, which one is the most effective in being able to fix Nigeria? Well, so if I ran for a local government chairman, do you think that I will be able to help to build Nigeria into a most desirable nation by 2025, which is something I've been talking about since 2004? I think the best chance that I have to add the best value with all of the experience that I have is at presidency. And I can promise you, if you think I'm not, qualified enough to be with political experience to be a president, I promise you, even if I go and run for ward councillor, they will tell me about the people who have been waiting in line for the last 20 years. Political experience has not delivered any real value to in 50 years to our nation. Political experience is not what we need. Leadership experience is what we need. Right. And I tell you, leadership experience is what we need. NYSC, I think NYSC has outlived its initial purpose. All right, it was at one time to be able to unite Nigeria after the tragic civil war that we had, and today NYSC should change its purpose. To me, I think NYSC should be a 1 year of not just serving your nation, but your nation serving you and preparing you for success in your career and in business. I want NYSC, which usually takes up about 285,000 coppers a year. I want NYSC to become an entrepreneurial development year. I want people to be able to know how to start a business and write business plans and know how to get funding and know how to become interns and do shadow CEOs and all of that. And when you've done all of that, guess what? Even if you can't start your business, and you will be able to get some of the funding from NYSC and other people who will just co-fund angel investors, even if you can't and you just decide to work, by the time you're done with NYSC, you will have the values, work ethics that will make you be able to fly anywhere in the world. All right? So I think NYSC should really be about entrepreneurial development. Minimum wage. Well, good news for those who may not know. The minimum wage bill has just been passed last week in the House of Assembly. So right now, to the best of my knowledge, it's officially now going 30,000 naira minimum wage, which is still really, let's be clear about it. It's minimum, yeah? But even then, that was what was negotiated, right? By the organized private sector, by the government and all of that. But let's be clear about something. The greatest challenge we have is not even about the minimum wage. It's about the level of productivity and earnings. Is that if we are able to increase our productivity and people are able to earn more, then we will grow out of this minimum wage conversation. Because there was a time when you could buy a Peugeot 504, brand new, for 4,200 naira in this country in 1982. So my point is this: it's not the amount, the quantity, it's the quality of the value that of the earnings that you have, that it may be able to provide for you, and make it affordable for you to live a decent life, to pay your bills, to pay your rent, to send your children to school, to be able to feed your family, and all of the kind of things that you need to do. So my point is, let's focus on how do we get Nigerians to be productive? How do we get Nigeria? Today, $1 is exchanging for 365 naira, which means that if I save 1 naira every day, after 1 year I will buy $1. So it's not just about how much then people are earning, but what the value of what they're earning and the value that they can create. That's what we should be focusing on also. Thank you.
Okay. I'm afraid that is all we have time for. Mr. Durotoye asked a question at the beginning: would you like him to emerge as the consensus candidate? And people raised their hands, so I thought it would be good to ask it at the end. Would you like him to emerge as the consensus candidate? Who would like him to emerge? I think you've made some comments today. So please join me in thanking both Mr. Durotoye and Mr. Denai, and please
opportunity to start again in governance. How come it happens as a cycle? No one can almost tell. The first general elections in December 12, 1959, brought us an opportunity where we ended colonial rule and started as an independent nation in 1960. 20 years after 1959, 1979, July 7th, we had another general election that ended 15 years of military rule and brought us into, civilian rule. 20 years after that was 1999. And in February 1999, we also had another general election that ended 14 years of military rule and brought us again into civilian rule. This juncture, this time, this moment, to be able to choose between the old Nigeria and the new Nigeria, where there will be jobs and opportunities for all, where the son of a nobody will become somebody without knowing anybody, for the simple reason that the nation will work for everybody. And that is what we are committed to. We're committed to driving a government that anchors on the 3 values of the party: transparency, integrity, and excellence. We will deliver according to what we have said, because we have lived a life delivering according to promise. Guys, all I'm asking you to do is, listen, you have people who believe in you. You have people who depend on you. And today I'm asking you to please make a decision. Accept responsibility to be a part of the next election. And make sure that you pick up your phone and call those people and advise them. Tell them that a new Nigeria is at hand. Tell them to go out and vote and not sit down at home. Tell them that they should waste their votes on a chance to build a new Nigeria. You tell them. When you tell them, they will believe you. But you must accept responsibility to do so. Lastly, I would like to say thank you so much for coming out now here. I know it's cold. I know you'd rather be in your homes, warm Saturday evening, or warming up on a cold Saturday evening. But it really means a lot to us that you're here. And I'm sure on behalf of the chairman and on behalf of the party, especially also those in diaspora, I would like to say thank you for coming. I would like to say thank you for joining your hearts and your hands with us to build a new Nigeria. And may God bless you as God blesses Nigeria. Thank you so much.